So Mark,
Yeah, I
you
just
see where it says participants on the bottom?
participant. Yeah.
Mark, where it says participants on the bottom, you click on it and you do mute all,
Okay.
and then you unmute the Rav, and then you go to speaker view.
Rabbi Wein, you have to speak.
Yeah, right. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we're recording.
Okay. We ready?
Yes, we're ready.
All right. Very good day to everyone. I'm speaking to you from Muncie, where we have snow flurries in honor of springtime. This week's Parshas, Tazria Metzora, are, to put it mildly, not necessarily the favorite ones of Rabbonim to speak about. There's an anecdote told about a man that applied to be a Rav in a shul, and the people in the shul, they really didn't want him, but they want to insult him, not give him a tryout. So the compromise was that they told him to speak Tazria Metzora.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for thinking of them. I really appreciate it.
That's from him. That's his son-in-law? No, that's his son. Oops, I need to unmute Rabbi. Rabbi Wein.
Okay, we're good. You can mute everyone and you can block the option from other people to speak, and then they can't unmute themselves. Okay, Rabbi, we're sorry for the delay, but we're good to go.
The rabbi's muted.
Mute all.
Hit mute all, take off the option from people to unmute themselves, and you unmute the Rav.
Okay, I'm looking for Rabbi Wein. What name is he under? Wein
He's good to
family.
go. He's unmuted. He's unmuted. He's good to go.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, now it's good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Why is she-
so
We start
I'll
again.
say that Divrei Torah, Aniyim b'mokom echad, v'ashirim b'mokom acher. The words of Torah sometimes appear to be less than meaningful in one place, but they are very rich in meaning in another place. And we're not talking only about places or circumstances. We're also talking about time and eras and events and circumstances. So usually Tazria Metzora is seen to be a very esoteric topic, something that is shrouded in mystery and not so relevant, so to speak, to our lives because we're unaware of what Soras is. We're unaware that that plague, so to speak, exists. But I think all of us by now are well aware that there are such plagues, and plagues that are not identifiable, viruses that cannot be seen, and all sorts of things that cannot be understood. And therefore, there are great advantages, so to speak, in self-quarantine, in separation, in contemplation, in being alone with oneself. So I want to talk to you about tsaras, this mysterious affliction, which appears somehow in a physical form upon the flesh of a human being. But Chazal always saw it to be a spiritual affliction, not only something that's physical. It's not chas v'shalom like a fracturing a bone, which we understand how it happened and it's visible. This is something that is invisible. And the whole concept of Tuma and Tahara are invisible concepts. Because of this, the traditional explanation for the cause of this affliction has always been Lashon Hara, evil speech, violating the guiding principle in the Torah, Lishoncha me'ra u'sfasecha medaber mirma. Person has to guard his tongue. He has to be able, because Chazal say, to clench his teeth, to purse his lips, not to say things. And therefore, Chazal always said, Mila b'sela betray. If a good word, no matter how good, is only worth one sela, but silence is worth two. Because we rarely, if ever, have to regret what we don't say. But there are countless incidents in our lives that we wish that we could retract the words that we did say. So therefore, it's Lashon Hara is the cause of tzaras. And we find that in the Torah itself, in all the cases of tzaras that are mentioned in the Chumash and in Tanakh. For instance, one of the miracles, so to speak, that Moshe Rabbeinu was empowered to facilitate when he came to convince the Jewish people that he had been sent by God, was the fact that he could put his hand inside on his bosom, and when he took it out, his hand was full of tzaras. And then when he reinserted it and took it out again, he was cured. The rabbis say that this was because of the fact that he spoke Lashon Hara against the Jewish people. When God wanted him to go on the mission, he said, "Hey, lo yaminu li," they won't believe. They're not believers. You're not allowed to say that about the Jewish people. You're not allowed to say, "Hey, yaminu li." And therefore, the symbol of that was the tzaras that he underwent. And we'll see that later by Miriam, that she is also afflicted by tzaras. But why? And therefore, the tzaras came upon her. And we find in Tanakh, one of the Haftorahs with Tazria Metzorah, the famous story of Naaman, the officer of the king of Aram, who was afflicted with tzaras. And he spoke Lashon Hara against the God of Israel, against the river Jordan, against the power of the prophet. You speak Lashon Hara, so then there's a reaction. And that's true in our time also, there's a reaction, except that we are not privileged to see the reaction immediately and in our own physical being. If we were able to do that, it would be a far different world. You have to believe that there is a reaction, and there's no question that there's a reaction. So Lashon Hara, the king Uzziyahu is afflicted with tsaras because he spoke Lashon Hara against the Navi. There's a pattern here. And that pattern should serve as a model and as a warning to people in general and to the Jewish people in particular. Now, there's another point that I find fascinating here, is that there's a connection to Jewish leadership. The people who are afflicted are the major figures in Jewish life. Moshe, Miriam, the king Uzziyahu, even Naaman, the non-Jew, who becomes a Jewish convert. These are people of stature, people of leadership, of importance. If the ordinary person is obligated, as one is, to observe the laws of Lashon Hara, much more so the great person, the leadership person. And the leadership person, more than anyone else, is aware of the faults of society. We may be hampered by bureaucracy. Sometimes we experience. But imagine if you, so to speak, are the postmaster general and you're running the thing and you have all these people working for you and you can't get them to work correctly. So the level of frustration must be enormous. And when people are frustrated, they say things. And therefore, leadership is more prone to Lashon Hara than even ordinary people. Not only that, leaders are, by the nature of the job, somewhat paranoid. They're always open to conspiracy theory. Somebody's always wants to take away their job. We find this tragically portrayed with Shaul HaMelech, who accepts Lashon Hara from Doeg Adomi about David because he is uncertain of his strength as the king. He's uncertain of his reign. So it is his paranoia that drives him to accept Lashon Hara. And therefore, the challenge of Jewish leadership is to rise above that. And not easy to do. But that becomes the measure of greatness. That's why it's David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. That is somehow an inner strength, an inner security that enables one to overcome what Lashon Hara does to people. And it's very interesting. There's a great anecdote that's told about the Chafetz Chaim. There's a little book, 100 stories about the Chafetz Chaim. I've read that book a number of times. Now, it says 100 stories about the Chafetz Chaim. It doesn't say that they're all true. But nevertheless, they characterize Chafetz Chaim. So one of the 100 stories is as follows, that the Chafetz Chaim once hired a wagon and a wagon driver to take him from his town of Rodden to another town. And the wagon driver did not know or recognize who his passenger was. they're riding along, and the wagon driver wants to make conversation. Wagon drivers, taxi drivers, Uber drivers, that's one breed. And she wanted to make conversation. So he said to him, do you live in Rodden? So Chofetz Chaim answered him, yes, I live in Rodden. He says, you know, there's a great tzaddik that lives in Rodden. The Chofetz Chaim was quiet. He said, you know, and they call him the Chofetz Chaim. He's such a great pious person, such a holy man, such a wonderful person, absolutely flawless and blameless. So the Chofetz Chaim said, he's not such a great tzaddik. He's not such a wonderful person. He has human frailties and faults. So the wagon driver became incensed at the fact that this man in the back was insulting the Chofetz Chaim. So he stopped the wagon, he got out and he slapped him. He said, you're Mavazer Talmid Chacham. You shame a great Jew. And then they went on and they went on and they went on in silence now. And then they came to the destination. Chofetz Chaim got out and he paid him. And the man turned around and he saw that there were the Chofetz Chaim. And he realized what happened here. And he ran to the Chofetz Chaim to beg for forgiveness. And the Chofetz Chaim said, don't worry, my friend. I bear no grudge whatsoever. You're more than forgiven. And you have taught me a great lesson. So he said, well, what's the lesson that I taught you? He said, the lesson is you can't speak Lashon Hara about yourself either. Which is a great rule in life, because no one knows our faults better than we do. And no one knows our frailties and weaknesses better than we do. So it's very easy to be down on ourselves. Yeah, we're not so righteous, we're not so good, we're not so honest, we're not so noble. Denigrate ourselves. And by denigrating ourselves, we lower ourselves. We should always ascribe to be what we aren't, rather than sink into what we are. And that's part of the lesson here of Lashon Hara and of Tzaras. And that's why it afflicted leaders. What do you mean, Moshe Rabbeinu, you speak that way? I've just told you you're going to head the Jewish people. And you're going to take them out, you're going to give them a Torah, and we're going to go to Eretz Yisrael, and the dreams of our mitzvah are going to be fulfilled for you, and you tell me, no, I can't speak, what can I do? I wasn't there for 60 years, they're not going to believe me. That's Lashon Hara about yourself. About yourself. It weakens you. You said, hey, lo yaminu li, they won't believe me. So God says, no, they'll believe. Hey, ma maminim, but hey, maminim, you, Taki, are not going to believe. Because you convinced yourself you're not. If you convince yourself you can't do it, you can't do it. I heard a documentary. I hear documentaries now rather than see them, which gives you a different view of them. No pun intended. In any event, it's an interview with a Navy SEAL, one of the SEALs in America are like the highest form of military perfection that a human being can attain. And he described the 2 years of training, which is just simply unbelievable what they had to go through. in order to finally graduate and become a SEAL. So one of the things that the SEAL has to undergo, something which all of us can experience, is to make the bed in the morning and then to stand while the bed is inspected. Now, he said after 2 years, he learned that you can never make the bed perfect enough that it passes inspection. No matter what you do, you can't do it. In fact, he became an officer. He had a conversation with the people that drew up the curriculum, so to speak. So he said, well, what is this thing with the bed? I understand to climb the rope ladder. I understand to swim 2 miles in a swamp with crocodiles. I understand how to use a knife. I understand everything else. But what's the bed? Make the bed. So he said the bed teaches you 2 things. It teaches you to strive for perfection, and it teaches you you will never attain perfection. If you learn those 2 lessons, then you have learned everything that the course is intended to teach you. So I recall that when I was 11 years old, which is some time ago, I must admit. It's amazing to me how much time ago. In any event, I was a entering student in the yeshiva in Chicago. Now, my grandfather was the Rosh Yeshiva, and he brought me into the yeshiva, even though I was only then in 6th grade. And he put me in a class with 14, 15, and 16-year-old boys, which is not a very good educational or social experience. But I persevered. In the class, they made so much fun of me. I was so nervous that I couldn't deal with it. And you'll excuse me, I vomited. And the Rabbi, who was such a wonderful man, Rabbi David Silver, of blessed memory, he was so kind. So he came over and he cleaned me up, and he got the janitor to clean up and he said to me as follows, and I was only 11 years old. I didn't fully comprehend what he was saying. He said, you know, when I was 11, he said, my father brought me to the preparatory, we would call it today, the middle school of Slobodka Yeshiva in Litte. So when I came, I naturally was 11-year-old kid out of the house. And what am I supposed to do? So the mashgiach, the yeshiva, said to me, listen, go and hang up your coat, go into the kitchen and eat breakfast first. And after you've had something to eat and to drink and you've hung up your clothes, then you can come and we'll give you a bechina and we'll see where we can, what class we'll put you into. So he said, I did so. And I hung up the coat. He said the way an 11-year-old kid hangs up his clothes. One sleeve in, one sleeve out, on an angle, crooked, barely holding on to the hook. When I so the mashgiach said to me, listen, my young man, I saw how you hung up your coat. He said, if that's the way it looks on your outside, can you imagine how confused it must look on your inside? He said, I was 11 years old. So he said, we'll grow out of it, but you'll always remember it. And that to me was the Navy SEAL. You'll never make the bed perfect enough, but you'll always try. That's what we want you to do. And so that was the test of leadership. You're not perfect and they're not perfect. Everything you say about yourself, Moshe, is true. You can't speak. Aaron's your older brother. Everything, Yisro's your father-in-law. Everything is true. There was, oh, but that's not, so what? So what? You're going to be Moshe Rabbeinu. Everything that Miriam said was true, but who told you to say it? You're the leader of Israel. You're the one that sings with the women. You're the inspiration. So now how do you do this? Uziyahu, you're the king of Israel. You're the king of Judah. What are you talking about? What do you mean? How do you compromise yourself so? And so the task of leadership is not to denigrate one's own self and not to denigrate the people or the bureaucracy or the country or the nation, but rather to raise them. Moshe learns that lesson because Moshe will say, all of a sudden he understood the mission. You said to me, raise this people. Where did God say that to him? We don't find any pasuk that says that Vayomer Hashem el Moshe halis o mazeh. Moshe understood it now. He knew the parameters of the job. And the parameters of the job are to raise them. Not to fall into the trap that Lashon Hara creates. Because Lashon Hara is its own vindication. We find many times a person says Lashon Hara, somebody says don't say it, he said, but it's true. It has nothing to do whether it's true or not. It has to do with the effect. And the effect is that it lowers, diminishes, it denigrates, it makes us less. And a leader is halis almost, raise them. You can't raise them if you don't raise yourself. That's a lesson from these parshas. One more lesson, which I will conclude. Can never over. The Gemara says, there was a plague of tsaras on a person's body, on a person's clothing, and also on a person's home, on the physical walls of the house. So there's a discussion in the Gemara regarding certain topics such as Bensora or Mora. The Gemara there is the opinion, I don't know how it could happen. There are too many technicalities. And the Gemara comes to the same conclusion regarding the plague that visits a house. The Gemara says because it has to be in the corner of two walls, that they have to be equidistant. The requirements are so strange as to render it almost impossible. So therefore the Gemara says, Lo hayav lo nivra. No, never occurred. Drosh v'kabel schar. You're supposed to study it theoretically, and you have the reward for studying Torah, but as a practical matter, it doesn't exist. The Gemara brings a dissenting opinion that says not only does it exist, I saw the grave of the Ben Sora Mora, and he said, and I saw the ruins of the house that had the plague and was destroyed. So some Sofer remarks, what are they arguing about? Here is a man that says, I saw, and he's a credible witness. So how does the Gemara say, Lo hayav lo nivra? It never happened. So there are all sorts of reconciliations in the texts. But one of the ideas, which I think is paramount, if a person says, Lo hayav lo nivra, a person says, my child can never be a Ben Sora or Mora. My house can never have a plague. We're perfect. Nothing touches us. That's when it happens. Because then you don't drive defensively. Then you are not aware of what the true dangers are. So you think that if you wear the uniform and you live in the right neighborhood and you vote for the right party the way you're supposed to, I'm protected. So the Lord sends a virus that affects everybody. From the holiest of holy to the tawdriest of the tawdry. And don't say it can't happen. Everything can happen. And therefore you have to be careful. And you have to be more than careful. And to try and avoid falling into that trap. The trap that Lashon Hara opened and that forsaking and the values and morality of Torah only digs deeper. So I think that these are valuable lessons that we can learn from the Parsha. And the Parsha therefore speaks to us. And even though we won't hear it read publicly yet in the Bet Knesset, we can review it privately and gain our own insights and our own understanding and our own appreciation of the greatness that is being committed to us so that we can grow and be the holy people, the Mamlechas Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, that we were raised to be. So I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, the best of everything. I thank you for zooming in. It's a pleasure to be with you. And we'll be with you personally. I hear that some airlines already are promising that by the end of May they'll be flying. So once they fly, I hope to fly as well. And the Mir Hashem will hear good news from each other. Shabbat Shalom.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's really a big schus for us, even though we're far away from Rabbi physically, but to be able to be close spiritually and to be able to see the Rav and to get the words of chizuk and inspiration. And the Rav should have a lot of good health and happiness. And in the name of the Kehillah, big yashakol for Shiur.
Keep it up.
Okay, it's a big schus for us.
Bye.
Okay, we unmuted.
Bye.
Rabbi Wein, tell us the story.